If I'm speaking too fast, let me know. All right. um, I see this as an update of what we have done in Singapore. The Serious Game Association is something that we set up in 2012. So it's a very young association. But I work a lot with the healthcare organizations in Singapore. So before this gets started, thank you. Okay, very simple. Just a short description about what healthcare in Singapore is like. We are a very, very small country, so small, but yet we have three main healthcare organization groups. So we call it SingHealth, we call it the National Healthcare Group, and also the last one, the National University Hospital System. Now, out of all this, 90% of the hospitals in Singapore are owned by the government. So, well, everything is part of this healthcare organization. So I work a lot with the largest one, which is SingHealth. Okay, so as an association, it's just a member, but interestingly, we have only less than 10% of our membership in the developer side. 90% of our members are actually made up of clinicians, doctors, nurses, army officers, so on and so forth, right? So these are the teachers who develop serious games with us, or what you call the subject matter experts. Okay, so in the last few years, we figured that there are three people who needs to be inside the ecosystem. You have the developers, you have the content experts, and then you have the instructional designers. So this is what we were trying to build the ecosystem in Singapore, right? Looks simple, but we realized it's much harder. So we decided that we need help. So that's when I got in touch with Mary and said, look, can we borrow your evaluation framework and see how we can develop the entire serious game ecosystem in Singapore? So like what Mary said, there's 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, which is perfectly nice. And then you basically develop your framework into game description, rationale, functionality, validity, and data protection, which we thought is kind of relevant. So we start with game description. Then we saw these questions. They were altogether 50 over questions that was inside their evaluation framework. Then we said, wow, okay, there's operating system, web link, so on and so forth. You know, these are very nice questions. We decided to throw this over to the nurses who are developing the games and say, would you like to follow the framework? Naturally, they came back to us and said, what are you talking about? Okay, so we said, look, if we want to build an ecosystem, we decided that we have to help all the different nurses and doctors if they really want to do that. So all of these questions that you're asking are very technical questions. So what we have to do, we build a platform. Simple. I then work with the largest healthcare organization, which is SingHealth, and SingHealth has recently, or not recently, at the beginning of this year, agreed that they will take responsibility. That means the hospital themselves will take the responsibility and say, we consolidate, we solve the IT problem if they want to build their games. Not the industry, but the hospital themselves. So this is a hospital group. It is, they look after all the different hospital units, like for example, the bigger ones like Singapore General Hospital, the KK Women's and Health Hospital. They also look at the heart, National Health Heart Center, the dental center, and so on and so forth. So they said, why don't we build the platform that everybody can sit on? Whether you're building games, you're building AR, you're building VR, sit on the same platform. Are we able to do that? They said, yes, we should do that. Okay? Then we look at your rationale. Same thing. Look at all the questions. What are the purpose? The game. Please describe the goal of the game in one sentence. Now, all of this means that we are asking our nurses and doctors, please answer all these questions if you're building the game. Good. What do we need then? We decided that we have to educate our doctors and nurses. If you talk to them, they have no idea what you're talking about, and then you ask them for objectives and so on and so forth, they find this as a difficulty. So, what do we do? Together with the healthcare organization, then the academia group, which is the education department of the healthcare group, we actually approached the local universities in Singapore. We said, why don't we set up an entire curriculum to teach our doctors and nurses? That is what we have formed. SUTD is actually the overseas arm of MIT lab in US, MIT, as in the US MIT. So we work with SUTD. We actually develop a full program on serious game design. And serious game design, not teaching our doctors and nurses how to design the game, but actually teaching them about human motivation. Why would you want to play a game? How do you sustain the game? How do you actually give points inside the game? So SUTD developed the whole process with us. And then we work with the technology, Temasek Polytechnic, to talk about how do you project manage a game project, right? You ask a doctor and a nurse, how do you project manage? They find it a big problem, okay? Because you, as a developer, they start talking about 3D, 2D, Unity, and so on and so forth, and the nurses are talking about patient care, it's two different worlds. So we decided that we have to teach them, they have to know how to manage a project. So that is where Temasek Poly comes in and say, we will teach them and show them how a project should be managed. Then we look at data. You talk about data privacy and everything else. Yes, we agree, data is important. But do you collect the data at the end and say the data is important and this should be the data should be in the game? What we are trying to say is that when you start planning the designing of the game, what data you want to collect should be in the front, not at the back, right? So then we work with the National University of Singapore, and we look at how do you incorporate the capturing of the data at the beginning when you are first helping designing the game. So that is a full set of courses that we are coming out together with the hospital and said, look, we have to teach them and we have to educate them how this is done. So we are rolling out the courses in June this year, right? Then we look at functionality, validity. Again, a full set of questions to help us. What will the player learn? Describe the learning and behavior objectives of the game. So all of these questions, again, refer back to what you have in your instructional designer. They need to come in and say, where are the objectives? What is the learning outcome? Right? A lot of these questions really baffle the nurses and doctors. And then you want them to show validity. Who are the people who are coming in to actually do this validity test? So again, we go back to the university and say, can we incorporate the testing of the validity using the university's program? So that is where the university actually stepped forward, and right now with SUTD, there's a new course that they have developed and they're launching August this year, actually looking at serious games in healthcare. Literally a degree course where there's serious game developed for healthcare. And the students involved in that particular course will actually be doing the validity tests for a lot of the games that's being developed by the hospitals. So we look at this entire ecosystem and we said, look, we have to help if you want to build up people who are building up the games, all right? So basically we are looking at innovation, education, and research, right? Then we come to data protection. Yes, there's a lot of data. And in each game, we realize that the data is the important one. So after this, I'll show you one of the games that we actually developed. And the interesting thing is this. In Singapore, it's much easier to test the game once the hospitals are involved with us. So there's one game that we actually developed called the blood transfusion game. A lot of the games that we develop are actually used for assessment, okay? Why do we look at that? Because the nurses in Singapore, we're having a hard time because we got very few nurses coming in and they are doing multiple roles and we have to assess them, we have to keep training them, but we don't have that much time. So we actually use a game to actually assess blood transfusion for nurses. When you look at 2030 test group, we don't do that. We look at 3,000. So immediately, our first test was using 3,000 nurses doing the blood transfusion game, and you will find that the data that we collect is tremendously amazing, okay? So this is something that we look at, data security. It's very important to us, especially when Singapore is the first one who lost 1.5 million data recently to the hack last year. So we have to look at that component. And because of that hacking and losing of data last year, SingHealth, which is actually part of government, actually decided that we should, or at least when they build the platform, they should be the one housing the data too. So all the game data that is actually housed on our platform, we are also looking at how do we then house all the data within the same platform. But the amazing thing is that when you start to have data across different games, then you can start doing correlation of information across the platform. Okay? So the entire ecosystem is that you have to have industry partnership, you have to have university partnership, the hospital themselves must be involved, and finally, this is what we are trying to achieve. Within SingHealth, we are now in the process of establishing a new institute, and they call it the Innovation and Technology Center. And within the new Innovation and Technology Center, we are going to establish the Serious Game Accreditation and Research Center. So basically, the evaluation and accreditation will be done together with the hospital, okay? And this is something that we are striving to achieve. And in that department, the people that we work with is exactly people in the simulation side. So it is actually established together with the Institute of Medical Simulations in Singapore. But I think this is what ultimately we hope to achieve. We need to find a new business model for our games. So this is what we have been talking a lot with our government, and this is what they kind of bought into the idea, and that's the reason why we are doing the platform. We realized that a lot of the game projects are funded by grants. So the government actually prepared a lot of these grants, and we keep funding the projects. But all the projects keep dying very early. I don't know, is it the same here, but at least for us, it either continued to remain in the labs or it died somewhere very fast. And the kind of grants we give out is about $50,000 to $250,000 per grant for each game. So we figured that we're spending a lot of millions of dollars in this, and it doesn't make sense, right? So what the government is trying to say, or at least what SingHealth is trying to say, is that, okay, last year onwards, they stopped giving out the grants. They said, we should relook at this entire business of developing games or AR, VR solutions until we figure out what we want to do with them, right? So number one, we use your evaluation framework to first train our people, train the doctors, train the nurses, understand what they are expected if they want to go into such development, so they don't give up halfway. Number two, so that they can talk to the people technically and say, you know, this is what I want. Then we look at the whole system and say, if the platform is owned by the government or owned by SingHealth, the next thing is, how can we create revenue out of this game? Is there a way to create revenue so that the government doesn't need to keep funding it? At least revenue enough to sustain the maintenance of the games that is being developed. So yeah, we decided that maybe with the platform, we can look at a game depository, okay? If we are accrediting the game, so that is another problem that we face when it came to the games. Now, when I take my game from one hospital and go to another hospital, the other hospital will ask me, who else have used it? Show me your references. You know, did somebody die, you know, or get into an accident? Or did the insurance company cover that? So a lot of these questions came out. So our accreditation is also a way of marketing and saying that these are standards that we put onto the games. But the other thing is that if I think beyond Singapore, if I think about Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, how do I go out there and say, would you like to use my game? So what SingHealth is saying is that, what SingHealth is saying is that if everything is developed on the platform and it's a shared depository, meaning all the games are put into a single depository, then we can actually serve as a central publisher. We put all the games together, and then we go to another hospital, and we say, this is a full suite of games you want. Choose, pick from us, okay? And then we have an internal arrangement as to, if this game is made by this developer, treat him as a single author. Then the percentage is shared with the author. So this system is now being developed legally in Singapore. We are trying to establish it. We are trying to figure out how this can be done so that we can actually market the game out, and then there's revenue going back to the developer, and hopefully the game goes from version 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Because the grant is not a bottomless pit. We can't keep giving grants away like that. All right? So this is the business model that we are trying to build in Singapore. So very quickly, I have to figure out. Yeah. Okay, I tell you what, because of short time, I'll skip the neonatal resuscitation game. We'll go straight into the blood transfusion game. So these are the games that we actually developed. So it's very procedural based. The forms that is being made actually follow exactly what the hospitals are using. So they're supposed to figure out the forms and actually checking on the forms to make sure that there's the right patient to give the transfusion. And then the packing and ordering of the blood bags and so on and so forth. I think very quickly, what I'm trying to say is that what we have learned from this is that we even broke the game into 6 different parts. So that the game, when it's broken into 6 different parts, we can actually modify each part of the game. Meaning that even in the first part under documentation, the forms can be changed, and if we change that particular part of the game, we can actually start marketing it to Malaysia, to Thailand, and so on and so forth, because not every hospital follows the same procedure. Right? Everything that they do inside the game is actually tracked, so we have average 3,500 to 4,000 data points per game, per use. So imagine 3,000 nurses using it and playing it more than 10 times the amount of data that we are having. So all of this is actually inside the game. All right? So finally, summary, this is what we have developed, and this is what we are using your evaluation framework for, and we are actually progressing from there. And thank you so much for everything that you share with us. Thank you.